Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Samuel Burke. I'm a business and technology correspondent for CNN and its affiliate networks. I want to thank everybody for welcoming me back in. Good news to report, I've had my coronavirus tests and they're all negative, which means I could have been there with you, but better safe than sorry. This conversation is all about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and the security threat we face from them. So I want to bring in our panelists who are right there on stage, starting with Sebastian Cochinescu. He's the founder and CEO of Teopath, as well as Mihai Ivashku, who is the CEO of Modex. I want to thank both of you for letting me be there with you virtually. And let's get right to it. I want to start with the headline that's probably the biggest headline that we've seen from Bitcoin in the past weeks, although every day is a barrage of Bitcoin headlines. And this time it was from the governor of the Bank of England. He said that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value and everybody investing in Bitcoin should be prepared to lose their money. Now, interestingly, a lot of defenders of Bitcoin said he's absolutely right. Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, and they turn to the theory of value, which is that people give something, currencies, many commodities, their value. So, Sebastian, I want to start with you. How do you respond to that? And isn't it true of almost anything that any currency doesn't have any intrinsic value? It's the worth that people give to it?
Hi, Sam. You're perfectly right. So, and the governor is also right. But also we have to look at fiat currencies. What gives them the value that we put on them? So it's the government. It used to be backed by gold. How come fiat currencies have value and Bitcoin doesn't? So we have to dig a bit deeper into what makes a currency sound money, and we have to look at divisibility, if it can be used to buy things that are small or big at the same time. And also we have to look at its endurance over time and over space. So if all these three are okay, then we can say sound money are checked. And Bitcoin so far checks all three. So it's a tricky question, and if we decide to put value in a currency, it could as well be Bitcoin.
Mihai, you just heard what Sebastian Cochinescu said, but does cryptocurrency have less intrinsic value than, I don't know, the US dollar or the euro?
Yeah, definitely. For the time being, I could agree with that. I'm a firm believer in the value of certain cryptocurrencies as the governing cryptocurrencies of that ecosystem. We're looking at blockchain as the underlying technology of great ecosystems. And in some ecosystems, those cryptocurrencies have an intrinsic value, but I would not consider that the intrinsic value of those at the global level is really a replacement for the fiat currency.
What do you mean by that, Mihai, that some of the cryptocurrencies have intrinsic value? Drill down on that for me.
Yeah, when you're looking at a network like Ethereum, for example, who has an incentive that gives out an incentive to the ones contributing to its existence, those individuals or those organizations need to be paid to maintain the network and to achieve the decentralization that we all speak about. And in that case, purely the Ethereum cryptocurrency has an intrinsic value. There are some other ones. There are small ecosystems, startups that have developed a strong intrinsic value within that ecosystem, but I don't believe that the global value of those cryptocurrencies available anywhere. We're not there yet, but I'm a strong believer in cryptocurrencies issued by governments. There are, I think, the governor of London National Bank wants to look at that direction. We're a big supporter of that, and we strongly believe that that's the near future. It's actually the present, not the future.
I just want to share a little anecdote. journalism institution that I don't work for recently got in touch with me and said they needed a new cryptocurrency editor. Why did they need a new one? Because the other one had gotten so rich on Bitcoin that he didn't need to work as a cryptocurrency editor anymore. When you look at the amount of statements that were made, Sebastian, about this being a fad, and then you see these types of situations where you see millionaire after millionaire, even billionaire after billionaire, not quite as many, but they're out there. People who don't need to work in their previous fields now. What does that say about cryptocurrency? What does that say about Bitcoin, given that millionaires are being minted, not overnight, but seemingly overnight?
So it's a double question from your side. First of all, I would say that it's a bit worrying for me how concerted the efforts are against Bitcoin this time. So Bitcoin died 40 times before. In less than 10 years, it's died 40 times. Now it's like the 40th death of Bitcoin. What's worrying is the concerted effort from media and from a lot of strong voices in this ecosystem against it. And this, when this happens, it's always alarming sound for me as to look into what's going on behind the scenes. Why is it so vocal, this trend against Bitcoin? So this would be one side of answering your question.
Before you get to that second answer, and I want to get to that, I want to stop there for a second,
sure.
Because I was thinking about my role as a journalist. I've never said, oh, cryptocurrency is never going to go anywhere, because I know predictions and journalism don't mix very well. How did the media get it so wrong, though? Because clearly they have. Nobody would have predicted in the media that you would see the value of Bitcoin so high. So why do you think we, the media, got it so wrong?
Well, I think there's always this threat of getting it wrong when it comes to disruptive technologies. If you look at the early 90s TV shows in the US, internet was seen as a fad, and email, they were actually mocking emails compared to snail mail. So it's kind of a common thing or a common theme to be reluctant to new stuff in general, but to new technologies in particular. But then there's this new nuance that this time the voices are more strong than ever. And this tells me that it becomes a threat to some actors.
Meaning that it's a threat to other people's incomes or their own investments?
I would say it's a threat to governments, actually. I think we are witnessing a change of a tide that's lasted for 500 years, and we are at the beginning of a turning point for 500 years starting now. And whenever this happens, it's going to be a bit, let's say, a bad outcome for the status quo of the present powers. So maybe that's the reason.
I want to get Mihai to respond to that, but you said you had a second part to your answer, so if
the
you
second
still
part,
remember it, go ahead.
Sure, was related to billionaires or millionaires made out of Bitcoin. I'm not really underlying that or pinpointing to that, because if you are a believer in blockchain technologies such as I am, then you would say that one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin now, and it would be for the next few hundred years. So it's not relevant how much it's valued into fiat right now. So if you are a strong believer in that underlying technology, then it's pointless to compare it to its fiat value. Then it means you actually value more fiat than crypto, and crypto is just a speculative asset.
Okay, so Mihai, let's take what Sebastian just said there. He said that this is a real threat to governments, which makes perfect sense. Governments control currency. It allows them to control fiscal policy. It allows them to look at all types of things, from taxes to tax evasion. So just how serious a threat is Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies to governments?
Look, we're in front of the biggest movement of capital in the history of mankind. Capital is moving from the banking system, from the normal stock market and all the derivatives that we know, to a new asset class. And it's the biggest and the most aggressive movement that we've seen so far. I think people have a big appetite for risk. It's a lot of risk involved when they're looking at cryptocurrencies. And in terms of the threat for potential for governments, I agree with that. I've seen this industry from day one. We've issued also regulated cryptocurrency. We work with local governments. We work with the GFCA. And we spend a lot of time with regulators and lawyers trying to find a framework for that. And I think, if a framework, a regulatory framework would have been launched in the market, we wouldn't have had all of these situations that are now affecting the cryptocurrency market. So I'm fully for a regulated environment. Regulated does not mean very restricted. It's a constructive type of restriction and compliance that allows governments to cash in their taxes and allows governments to maintain a control over capital movements. Because in one day or in 1 hour, you can look at billions moving from a local economy to a different economy. And with that risk over there, I think it's a systemic risk if the cryptocurrencies will grow without proper oversight and regulatory framework.
But Mihai, true or false, if I want to make a big earning on Bitcoin, a killing on Bitcoin, a profit on Bitcoin, and not pay tax on it, it would be much easier to do that than if I were trying to avoid or evade taxes on US dollar currency in a more standard way. True or false?
I think false, because if you try to use the Bitcoin that you have, you need to exchange it into fiat currency. And the moment you exchange it, that's taxable. While if you keep the same amount, $36,000 in cash in your home, that's quite hard to track, and that's quite hard to tax for the government. So, I mean, I don't see it as a big threat. The governments already know all the movements. Everything is very clear. The regulatory framework has been around cryptocurrency holdings for years already. There's an income tax, there's a profit tax that you need to pay. And I think it's quite simple to track it down. The hardest problem is still with the cash.
But if I'm buying goods or services or whatever in Bitcoin and I don't have to transfer it into dollars, euros, etc., then isn't that the problem that I was addressing? That if everything's in Bitcoin, won't it be much easier to avoid taxes, launder money, etc.?
I fully agree with you. In that case, in that specific case, that's a clear situation where none of those parties are declaring, and that's a clear case for tax evasion, definitely.
Sebastian, isn't that what the major threat is here? That if places, and increasingly many places are accepting Bitcoin, then there's a real chance, a real probability maybe, that people will be able to avoid taxes, evade taxes much easier than before.
We get again to the underlying philosophy. Some people may argue that taxation is theft. Some other people argue that taxation is actually something good, and it's something that keeps our society together. So it depends on which side are you. So I would try to be in the middle and to answer that the biggest threat of cryptocurrencies is not to avoid taxes. In the end, you can't avoid death and taxes, right? But the biggest threat is to the geopolitical stability of countries. So that's the biggest threat that comes with the cryptocurrencies towards our nations and our current state. Instead of just seeing it as a way to launder money, as you said, because it's actually a bit difficult to launder money these days using cryptocurrencies. It's a lot easier to use cash. And if you look at the numbers, a lot more illicit activities go on through cash and through regular banking systems. Just look at the latest scandals involving huge banks that were used for laundering money. And compare it to what's going on the dark web, and you're going to see a huge discrepancy in numbers, just in sheer numbers. So I think...
But I just want to drill down on one thing you said there. You said that it's a bigger threat, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, to geopolitics than it is to taxation?
Yes.
Okay. Elaborate.
Well, you have to see it. I'm just guessing here, like anyone else, but you have to look at to connect the dots, right? So there's Iran. So in Iran, the Bitcoin mining was banned, and then there's China. In China, the financial institutions were banned from using cryptocurrencies or for Bitcoin in particular. And then you have Turkey, where they banned the usage of cryptocurrency. So there are these three sides of the same coin, if there's a coin with three sides, where you see states and state powers trying to limit cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular. Why is that? You have to wonder, why is that? And also you have to wonder, why is Russia actually embracing cryptocurrencies so open wide? So you just have to connect the dots and wonder, and I wouldn't want to speculate more. I just want to see and to see what's out there and to perceive it as a threat before it happens.
Okay, but if it is a threat, Sebastian, which clearly you're saying it is, what do we do then?
We have two options, as usual, to embrace it or to fight it. And it comes back to the previous answer that I gave you about the concerted effort against Bitcoin. So we see this wave against Bitcoin, and we see an embracing the technology. We do that as a company, as a private company. We embrace the technology, and there are some states in the United States where there's a good regulation in place already for Bitcoin-friendly and crypto-friendly. And just as a side note, in the European Union, there's a legislation more than 500 pages long regulating cryptocurrencies, and we just received it in Romania. I was a part of a team that was consulted by the Romanian government on this. So there are some steps to work together and to embrace the change and the technological disruption, but we can also fight it, as I mentioned Iran earlier. So you can pick one.
Okay, I want to just go through, Mihai, a list of headlines here. U.S. Department of Justice reveals growing Bitcoin and crypto national security threat. Bitcoin is a threat to national security. Bitcoin is a grave threat to American national security. I mean, these are some of the most respected institutions and officials in the United States talking about this threat. I think you even said that you want to talk about here the growing list of ransomware, of theft, of blackmail with Bitcoin. So looking at those headlines, how can we not see this as a security threat? I'm sure you'll say that we should see it in some ways as a security threat. But how does a government embrace Bitcoin then when you see all these types of headlines?
Yeah, I think local governments should spend more time in developing tools of capturing all that informational value that it's in those blockchains. So if you use it right, you can actually get a lot of intel, and you can actually stop a lot of things. On the other hand, there are a lot of threats that are being facilitated by the blockchain network and blockchain networks, and I'm not talking just about Bitcoin. I'm talking about some anonymous infrastructures like Monero or some other ones used by cyber terrorists to obtain funds in the case of ransomware. But we spent a lot of time in this space. We've seen what are the pluses and the minuses. Monitoring of the wallets is one of the most important things that has to be done. And, you know, I've seen a lot of reluctancy from a lot of governments who just don't spend enough time on this matter. They treat it as a side tech thing until it becomes a problem. So I think we should have, at every local government, we should have a task force for cybersecurity, because this becomes an alternative way of moving value around the world. And it becomes a way to facilitate or to sponsor different illicit activities. So on one hand, I see the bad comments around blockchain and crypto, but on the other hand, I don't see enough activities, even from the SEC or the IRS, purely on the monitoring on the taxes. I know the FBI is doing an incredible job in monitoring all of that. We've been in some task forces and discussed about that, and they are on top of all the wallets that are out there in the internet. There are a lot of other agencies that have full visibility on the wallets, and actually they are embracing that type of network because they can get intel about potential adversaries that are using it without being noticed. They think they're not. But actually this becomes a way to monitor. But I think governments should spend more time and energy in building task forces, like real ones, and working with the public sector and private companies that have developed a lot of IP around monitoring, around and around this new technology, which cannot be stopped at this point.
You sound a little bit like Mark Zuckerberg, Mihai. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult to you, but clearly you're somebody who's doing very well with Bitcoin, let's be honest. And so, of course, we hear this from a lot of companies. When somebody's doing very well, when there's a reason to keep the profit going, it's, okay, so the government should get on board. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not disagreeing with you in any way. But sometimes we don't realize, or we're indifferent to the consequences of all of the actions that are going on because we're doing so well ourselves. I don't think Bitcoin's going away. I don't think anything you said is wrong. But could it be because so many people are profiting and doing so well that we're blindsided by that and we don't realize the consequences of it? I'm using the Mark Zuckerberg example because I remember when Donald Trump won and Mark Zuckerberg laughed at the idea that Facebook could have influenced the election. And then that became an incontrovertible truth that, of course, Facebook had influenced the election. Whether it had swayed the election one or another is a different discussion. But is it possible that what's coming down the line is really has the potential to be very bad, to be very negative, and that some of us are excited by the technology and loving the profit, Mihai?
Yeah, look, we're spending a lot of time developing the underlying technologies. We are not pro-crypto within our company or within the organizations that we collaborate with. I mean, we're not really supportive of this investment tool, not at all. We're using the blockchain technology as a core infrastructure for the enterprise projects that we're developing. We have strong partnerships with some of the biggest organizations around the world. And we implement blockchain at the enterprise level to achieve data integrity, data immutability. And I would like to spend some more time discussing about the real value of blockchain in an organization, not just about crypto.
Let's get into that. Sebastian, I will get to you. I won't keep you on mute the whole time. I'll get right back to you. But Mihai, I think this is actually something that the media and a lot of the conventional wisdom actually got right from the get-go. There are a lot of people who told me, if Bitcoin comes and goes, may or may not happen, but blockchain is here to say, and so many people have looked at the intrinsic value of blockchain as a way to reform so many things, from government services to all different types of industries. So let's put Bitcoin on pause for a second. We'll get back to Sebastian and the security part. And Sebastian, you can interrupt whenever you like. I don't mind interruption on panels. So Mihai, for someone in the audience who doesn't realize, and I've seen it firsthand, so please go for it because I've seen it, I know it, what the value in terms of security, in terms of improving society is for blockchain. Explain it as though my grandma were right here listening, who doesn't understand anything about technology, in the most simple form, simple examples, and then Sebastian, you jump in. What are some of the great things that we can do with blockchain?
Yeah, let's talk about one of the hottest topics nowadays, which is ransomware. We've seen companies being attacked at their central point, which is their database. With the blockchain technology implemented in the backend, you have a central point and 5 or 7 other points in your organization. Yes. So when you're attacked at the central one, you can recover the information immediately and create a new central node. Long story short, if blockchain would have been implemented in those organizations that are now subject to ransomware, they could be up and running in 1 second with technologies like ours or like other ones, and there's absolutely no threat for them. So instead of just purely looking at Bitcoin as a way of paying for the ransom, we should also look at blockchain as a way to protecting against ransom and to get the maximum out of this technology. So decentralization is a really important thing, and as 90% of the world's data was produced in the last 24 months, we're looking at data as the most valuable asset for most companies or local governments. So I would look at how do we manage to protect that data and how do we manage to obtain the most important currency that it's out there. And today, for me, it's trust. How do we get quantifiable trust? And blockchain is the only zero trust technology that allows you to validate, verify the fact that that information is indeed the real one. So, you know, we've been here since 2015 developing technologies in this space. Again, we faced the ups and downs of crypto, but we were the ones developing blockchain enterprise solutions. So, you know, blockchain is really valuable. We tried not to speak about the backend technology. We tried to speak about the outcomes. And for executives, it becomes really interesting to know that they can protect against ransomware or minimize the losses. They can have data immutability and data integrity, and they can validate that indeed what they have in the database is the real information, and nobody has altered it, internal or external actors.
Sebastian, for anybody in the audience who doesn't know, just to clarify what Mihai said or add to it, what blockchain really does is create a centralized space where people can see who's using, how much they're using, so it creates a more transparent way of a record of information, a centralized record of information. Other examples, Sebastian, where you see a lot of potential for improving society, improving security, which is really the heart of our panel, by using blockchain, which is, of course, the underlying technology of Bitcoin and its other brother and sister cryptocurrencies. Sebastian?
Sure. So I would add here a simple word, which is very important, which is trust. Is what we sell at Tailpath. So trust is the most important thing that comes out of blockchain technologies. Trust without an intermediary, so decentralized trust, and this is the most important thing. Then, or characteristic of blockchain technologies. Then it comes, of course, from this it comes transparency and all of the other good things. So I would have just to add on your previous question. You just mentioned that there's a security threat or a national security threat. Bitcoin is a national security threat, right? You mentioned that earlier. Yeah. That I think is not actually referring to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies as a medium of extortion or of money laundering or just getting money through ransomware. But it's a national security threat because it's actually attacking the dollar, and it makes America at least weaker. So this is the national security threat that Bitcoin is posing right now. And
you don't think it's posing the same issue to the euro?
And to all other currencies. So if you look at the shift of powers again, so 60% of the current world currencies is in dollar, 60%, 2%, and it's decreasing heavily. 2% is in Chinese currency, for instance, and it's going up fast. So if you look at that, then you will see why Bitcoin is posing a threat and why cryptocurrencies are a national security threat to US at least. And now coming back to, again, what I've been quiet for quite a while, so I had to add here that you said how governments may embrace it. Well, governments are already embracing blockchain technologies, and I would just mention here Department of Homeland Security in the US, which has even a contest for blockchain applications that may be used in the national security agencies and within their agencies. So that's one example, but there are a lot of branches within the intelligence community that are actively using blockchain and cryptocurrencies as a medium of trust. So it's happening already. It's not a question of Bitcoin is bad, governments are good, let's see how they can fight and watch from the standlines and maybe get rich. No, that's not how it works. So governments are already adopting blockchain for what it's good at, and which is transparency and trust. And governments that will adapt to it will eventually prevail or remain as a powerful government. And
we have just about. Go ahead.
Sure.
Sorry.
I was just wanted to go to present day to the last question, which was regarding the value of blockchain. So I can't here not add what we do, which is ensuring transparency and trust in supply chains. So supply chains rule the world. Everything that we use, eat, wear, you name it, it goes through and comes through a supply chain. And usually within these supply chains, you have a lot of bureaucracy, a lack of interoperability, and a lot of misguided trust or lack of transparency. So blockchain may be used, and it is used actually to add this layer of trust to supply chains, and this may lead to, and it has a direct effect on saving people's lives. For instance, only in pharmaceutical counterfeiting, there are 1 million people dying each year. Not sure if you were aware of that. Or in food safety issues affect 600 million people each year. So all these things may benefit from this small bit of technology which is called blockchain. So now I'm up to date. Ready for it.
Just, I know how it works, but can you just explain? So for counterfeit pharmaceuticals, huge problem, as you mentioned, hundreds of thousands of people dying as a result of this. How would blockchain help fight that? I don't think most people understand that. So can you literally walk us through where a pill leaves the factory
Sure.
or leaves the counterfeit factory and makes it to my home here in London? How would blockchain fix that?
So if there would be a system in place that would allow you to check the provenance and the traceability of a certain item, in this particular case, pharmaceutical product, then you could actually check on a blockchain which is immutable, so the data cannot be altered. That's what makes it wonderful. And it's also decentralized, so there's no central point of failure or command. Then you would be able to actually see that what you are getting is true and it's not counterfeit. So it can be done on a package level, on a pill level. It is done actually, at least in the US already, and there are some major efforts into the pharmaceutical industry to add blockchain to these traceability systems.
I was just going to say before I cut you off, Sebastian, that we're about 15 minutes into this 45-minute panel, so just a little over 10 minutes left. And I just want to see if anybody has any questions. So feel free to send them in either online or if you're there in person. You guys, you can see the stage better than I can. Let me know if somebody comes up. So I want to open it up to questions. You see somebody? Let's go there, and then I'll ask the question I have after that. So who's ever there and however this works, so I can't see, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thanks. So you talked about both supply chain and the use of blockchain for governments. It can be a good thing, but we're also talking about the use of blockchain by fringe actors in the black market and so forth. It's clear that it's good that the US and other governments are ahead of this technology and embrace it. But then again, we have to accept that it creates enhanced capacity for opposing actors, whether we're talking about terrorism, traffic of drugs, traffic of weapons, things like that. So what would be the strategy, you think, to minimize the risk of the use of blockchain technology by illegal actors, basically? Thanks.
Can you just introduce yourself, your name, and what organization you're with before we go on with the answer?
Michna Flora from the German Marshall Fund. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Sebastian, let's start with you. I mean, we did talk about this a little bit, but I was thinking, as the gentleman was asking his question, are we glossing over this? I mean, I read the headlines. It's not like we're avoiding it. But Sebastian, is it fair to say that this problem has become worse? That this problem has become easier because of cryptocurrency? I'm not saying that we can't fix it and do the things that you and Mihai have talked about, but has it become worse because of cryptocurrency, Sebastian?
I will have to answer by giving you an example. So I'm not sure if you're aware of the Tor network, the Onion network, the one that is used to access dark web. So if you want to access the dark web, you're actually using a technology that was developed by the US Army in the 70s. So why did they develop that? Because they wanted their intelligence assets or their spies, right, to be able to hide in a crowd. So the easiest way to hide is to stay in a crowded place. So this is what happened with the Tor network. And when they decided to create this, to let this monster into the world, they actually knew that it might come as a side effect that this network would be used for illegal activities. And this network, it is used for illegal activities, right? Dark web, that's why it's dark. But then again,
just like the backdoors that's the U.S. intelligence services have exploited for so long become the same backdoors that hackers, etc., nefarious groups use. Yeah.
Sure, but then it makes it traceable. If you think about it, the largest networks in the dark web history were taken down exactly because they were using a technology that is traceable in the end. If a node is traceable, then you can actually get to the bottom of it. So the same with blockchain technologies. There are big companies such as Chainalysis that are investigating all wallets, as Mihai said earlier, and that are tracking very closely these wallets. So long story short, if you're a criminal and want to use crypto for hiding your operations or a terrorist organization, then cash is still the safest way to do it, not cryptocurrencies.
But Mihai, in the short term, just the short term, I'll give you and Sebastian the benefit of the doubt that this is like any technology and people can exploit it at first, but long term, if we do things right, we'll get solutions. But in the short term, is it correct to say that cryptocurrencies have enabled and made it easier for these nefarious groups to do nefarious work in the short term?
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement. I could support that, but I'm looking at the clear way of using this technology to stop them. We're working on a very interesting use case now with one of the biggest European countries. And we've seen some crazy things happening in the medical systems where cyber terrorists are deleting from electronic medical records your allergies. So basically, you go in a surgery and you can die in front of a doctor. So we're looking at cyber attacks of these sophistications that can be stopped by implementing blockchain technology over there, because you can do an integrity check and see that this is a fake medical record and the information was altered and it's been reconstructed. So while I'm looking at all the problems that are around cyber terrorism and how cryptocurrencies are fueling their activities, I'm also looking at using wisely this piece of tech to stop them, because they are now getting involved in some really sensitive areas like healthcare, with ransomware against hospitals. And on short term, I could agree with what you say, because all the regulators are not properly prepared to monitor this. But I'm also looking at small kind of like fraudulent things, like stealing a Facebook account or an Instagram account, and for that they are asking for $100 worth of Bitcoins. Small things like this, they are facilitated. But if you look at states organized cybercrime or bigger deals, they are never on blockchain networks, because everything can be completely traced. And companies like Chainalysis or some other ones that we work with, they don't have the problem of tracking. They can track even a wallet that goes to 1 million wallets and then is reconstructed again. They have AI tools to track absolutely all of the activities. And 95% of the global wallets are tracked today, and the beneficial owner is known. So I don't think we're looking at a massive threat over here. We're looking from the systemic point of view, where people will start using this even more, and large amounts of money will move from the current banking system to an alternative economic system.
Fight technology with technology.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? Anybody else in the audience who would like to ask a question?
My name is Levin Strauss from Strauss Group. This blockchain technology, can you adapt at a big organization like ours for the integrity of the middle and top management, and providing also a tool of internal security against the leakage of essential information to competition?
Exactly. This is what we've been focusing on in the last years. We have developed exactly a tool like that it works exactly like a camera and a microphone that you put in the room. So everything is tracked, and you have permission models for all of the fields in your database. So all of the changes are possible, but everything is versioned in the version history. And this is a type of infrastructure that is not public, is not on Ethereum, is not on Bitcoin, has nothing to do with that. This is a type of infrastructure that becomes systemic for your organization that has nothing to do with public networks. So public networks are the ones using cryptocurrencies and offer this kind of like global transparency. But when we're looking at the enterprise level, an organization like yours can really implement very fast without building or without a lot of changes a piece of technology like that. And this is our role to educate most of the executives around not crypto, not public informations, because everybody thinks that if I use a blockchain, my information is public, which is completely false. You can have a type of infrastructure that can be implemented in your organization that is controlled by the organization and by other stakeholders for purely the integrity checks, but this becomes a way to fight the internal attackers or the malicious attackers that are extremely good in modifying information. So we work with government agencies, with intelligence community, and we've developed use cases to ensure that that document is a real document, and you, as the CEO or as the head of your division, are sure that this is indeed the proper document that you want to present or the document that you use to go in a mission. And technologies like this exist, but we are we are fighting the crypto kind of like news, because every time we talk about enterprise blockchain, crypto comes in place, and yeah, it's a plus or a minus, but you know, there are solutions on the market, I can tell you that.
One more little completion. And the disadvantage are existing?
At this point, no. There were disadvantages before, where an infrastructure like that could mean changing your internal systems, changing your database, changing your engineer, and putting a minimum 10 million worth of technology investment in order to achieve that. Now, all of these technologies are available as a service. Like email was very expensive at the start, and now we use it very simple. So not that many. I could say that a proper setup network or a proper setup infrastructure allows only benefits for the management and allows you to have the proper integrity checks that some people don't even know that can be obtained. Blockchain solves the biggest problem of a centralized database, which means that whoever is the administrator of the database is the owner of the truth. It is just purely impossible with all the forensics, if the logs were properly deleted, to demonstrate on a technical expertise that the information was there. So that's why we developed all of this, we and some other companies in the industry, to allow management to define what is their truth in a zero trust ecosystem.
We have just about 1 minute left, so I want to just pass the microphone back over to Sebastian for 1 second. We heard how Mihai answered the question so eloquently, gives a good argument. What are not every business needs to invest in blockchain right now. I'm sure both of you would agree. But Sebastian, in your view, what would be the businesses that most crucially need to invest in blockchain right now, that it's really important to their livelihood to do it?
Those that really need transparency. And then when I say really need, is that not only by as a statement from the management, but really need to have this truth and this transparency added to their companies. So what we've noticed working with a lot of companies in industries, and is that usually there's a need for transparency, but when it comes to implementing these blockchain technologies, maybe there's some reluctance because there are some gray areas that does not need to be that transparent in the end. So that's a challenge right now. So to answer your question directly, whenever there's a need for trust or for transparency, you should think about adding a blockchain component if it's needed, and that's a big if.
If for anybody who's struggling with understanding blockchain, I always say, think about a Google Doc. If you use Microsoft Word, maybe try Google Docs. If the three of us were working in a Google Doc right now, I start the Google Doc, Mihai can come in and edit it. I can see which changes he's made. Sebastian comes in and edits the document, and then he can go back and see what Samuel wrote, what Mihai wrote, and so there's a record a version history of every way that we've contributed to this. So if you ever want to get your head around it, maybe I should have started off the panel or the next cryptocurrency or blockchain panel this way. Sebastian Cochinescu, founder and CEO of Tailpath, and Mihai Ivashko, CEO of Modex. I really want to thank you. It's been a really great discussion, and I hope that people realize blockchain is here to stay one way or another. So I really believe what both of you have said is really correct, that we're going to have to embrace it like every other technology. Like you mentioned, Mihai, from email on down, it's going to be at this point how governments and businesses embrace it, and that will determine the speed at which we can get our heads and our hands around it. Thank you to both of you, and thank you to everybody at the forum for letting us be here to discuss this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.